Okay, good evening and good afternoon, everyone. There are people who are just coming out of the waiting room. I see people are turning on their camera. So whoever wants to turn on their camera, we would be happy to see all of you, myself and all of the panelists. We will have our cameras on the entire time. And we're just going to give everyone a moment to connect to the audio coming out of the waiting room, and then we will get started. Okay, it looks like we are all set to go. So I'd like to welcome everybody to this event on industry research careers for PhDs. We're going to have a panel discussion and networking session. And this event is hosted by Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, our Career and Professional Development Office, also by INet NYC and STEMPeers. In the audience tonight, we have PhD students and postdocs from MSK and other institutions across New York City who are affiliated with the group INet NYC and also Grow Biotech, and also students and postdocs from institutions across the country and abroad coming from STEMPeers. So we're excited all of you are interested in learning more about an industry career or are already interested in pursuing this career path and are ready to apply to jobs. And I'm going to introduce all of our panelists who will give expert advice on this topic. But first, I'll introduce myself. If you don't know me already, I'm Feliana Stathis. I direct the Career Office for PhDs at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Okay, so here with us tonight, we have 6 panelists who are scientists and group leaders at all different types of big pharma. So we have a total of 6 panelists that I'll just list in alphabetical order. We have Arijit Bhowmik, who's a senior staff scientist at Regeneron. Hello, Arijit, thanks so much for being here today. Okay, and Regeneron is based in Tarrytown, New York. We have Maria Kiriak, who is an associate principal scientist in discovery chemistry at Merck, I believe based in West Point, Pennsylvania. Okay, hello, Maria, thanks for being here. Danilo Madalo, who's a group leader in translational oncology at Genentech, and I believe he's based in South San Francisco in California. All right, awesome. Thanks, Danilo, for being here. Aditi Kamra, who is a data scientist in data and statistical sciences at Roche, and she's based in Toronto, Ontario. Hi, Aditi, thanks for being here. And Manisha Rao, a senior scientist at AstraZeneca. And Manisha, where are you currently based?
I'm based out of Waltham, Massachusetts.
Okay, Waltham, Massachusetts, awesome. And Florencia Rago, Principal Scientist 2 at Novartis Institutes for Biomedical Research, which is short for, we were just having this discussion. Some people call it NIBR, some people call it NIBR. And so Florencia, are you based in Cambridge, Massachusetts?
Yeah, I am.
Yes, okay, great, thank you. All right, so thank you to everyone for being here tonight. Also, I'd like to introduce my co-moderator, Rupali Gund, who's based at Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey, and she's a member of the group INet NYC. Hi, Rupali. Thanks for being here today. Rupali has a couple of slides that she would like to present to all of you about INet. We're just going to take a moment to do that, and then we're going to launch into the panel discussion portion of our event. All right, so let me just give myself a moment to share my screen and get the slides started. Okay, so Rupali, can you unmute yourself and just tell us a little bit more about INet?
Thank you so much, Taliana, for such a kind introduction, and thank you all the panelists and audience for joining in today. I'm just going to talk about INet NYC in one slide. We are a volunteer organization based out of New York City, and INet NYC stands for International Networking. And it was founded in 2014, and our mission is basically to support STEM professionals in the New York City area. We organize a lot of career development events, and also we also plan on networking and social event that helps to build the community around the PhDs and postdocs that are based out of the New York City. And we also post many research opportunities which are based either inside or outside of the US. So You can, if you're interested, you can join our community. And I'm going to put all the links for various platforms in the chat box later. We are a community of over 900 foreign scientists, which are affiliated with various institutes based out of the New York City and the surrounding states, the tri-state area. And just plug in for our upcoming event. Taliana, can you go to the next slide? We are having this event, which is an after work hangout. And if you're interested, you are more than welcome to join us on March 24th, where you can meet some of our members and be a part of our community. So with that, I would like to move on to our panel discussion. And I will basically ask questions and then we can move on with the event. So starting with our first theme that I wanted to bring up today is what I will like to ask the panelists, like what are their main day-to-day responsibilities in their current job? And how do they feel that their academic career prepared them for their current role? And did they find any similarities or differences in the job responsibility that they have in their current role as compared to what they did in their academic positions? So anybody can start with it, but if Manisha, Maria, and Aditi wants to chime in first, because I think they are more recent joinees in the industry jobs, that will be great.
And could I also just very briefly a note for the audience that we have the chat open. So if you have a question for a panelist, just type in their name and what your question is, and we're going to keep an eye on the chat as well and try and type in some brief answers there. So utilize the chat for questions, and you'll also continue to ask questions in the breakout rooms too.
So I could go ahead with my experience so far at AstraZeneca. So I've been out here for just over 7 months, and I was a postdoc at MSK prior to this. In my experience, since the memory is so fresh as to what I did in my academic career, day-to-day responsibilities differ in terms of how you organize yourself and how you actually attend way many more meetings, and you're accountable for all the tasks assigned to you. And one major difference is that every project assigned is not an individual's responsibility, but it's a team's responsibility. So the day-to-day responsibility comes down to the fact that how you would achieve those goals. So in my team in particular, which is a rather small team, every Monday we go over the tasks and deliverables for the week, and we decide these would be the goals which have to be achieved every week, and we ensure that that is fulfilled by the following Monday. So more or less it is similar since I'm a bench-based scientist, but I do have way more meetings than I did before. For instance, in my current role, I actually only take meetings on Mondays because I have meetings all the way from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I can't really get any work done on the bench. And rooting to the second question, Rupali, which was how did the academic career prepare me for this role? So I would broadly like to classify that into two major attributes in my personal experience. I was lucky enough, firstly, to be exposed to a lot of clinical projects, and I did want to be in clinical diagnostics. So throughout my graduate student career, as well as my postdoc at MSK, I did work in clinical labs. Mainly my mentor at MSK is a clinician himself, so I was part of clinical trials at a closer extent, I would say. So I could gain more industry-based insight, which made this transition smoother. And second attribute I have is that I was exposed to a lot more scientific problems during my PhD as well as my postdocs, and all the problems were completely different, which required distinct skill sets, which building up a nice skill set toolbox would come in really handy and actually makes your transition into industry easier and also helps you pick up skills faster. And just moving on to the third question, which is how is it different or similar? As I mentioned, for me as a bench scientist, day-to-day activities and responsibilities are similar, but when it comes to the responsibilities, which, the freedom, which I'm sure other panelists would refer to as well, it is not that similar to what you have, the liberty to actually take the research to however far as you want. As when you were a PhD student, it is more regulated, but that is also because we like to put patients first, and you want to be more efficient and more reproducible with every work you do. And in my role, we have to work with really minute clinical specimens. So you have to make things work, and you have to be really creative in a shorter amount of time, which I think your academic career definitely trains you for it.
Thank you for your input. Aditi, you want to go next?
Sure. Thanks for having me here. So I think, so every day at Roche, well, it's been 3 years for me now, so it's not so fresh anymore, but I think every day at work, I do exploratory analysis of Roche's internal clinical trial data from their phase 2 and 3 portfolio. And another component of my work is actually building either biomarker analysis plans or statistical analysis plans for some of the early phase trials, and really working in cross-functional teams with clinical scientists, biostats, and trying to determine what's the best move forward. How it's different from my PhD or postdoc is that it's a lot more clinically oriented, right? So you are not, it's not playing with the data anymore. You have really pointed specific questions that you're trying to answer. You're prioritizing how do you meaningfully extract the best insights from the data that would directly impact the patient. So there's a lot more prioritization. I think the other difference is that in academia, you are taking multiple roles throughout the project lifecycle. So you're the person designing the experiment, then you're working with the vendor to get the data. Then maybe in a comp bio program, you're processing the raw data, then you're analyzing it, you're hypothesis testing, you're the one presenting, right? End to end. But here there are dedicated teams for each part of that life cycle. So there will be dedicated teams who have come up with a pipeline for processing your data. And then you're probably in the specialized team trying to think what is the best methodology. And then there'll be another person who's far more experienced in the competitive landscape and is then sort of presenting that data to an external audience. So I think that is a major difference. And in my PhD and postdoc, I didn't get as much exposure to clinical trials. So it is amazing to me, even today, what all goes into when a clinical trial is being planned out. Like, what does it take to convert a drug to a molecule? And there's so many components that I don't think we realize in academia. So I would say that has been a massive eye-opening, and it's really interesting to learn. And I agree with Manisha, there are way too many meetings to attend now.
Looks like there's a lot of teamwork, but then there's also time off from your work because you have to attend all those meetings for collaborations. Maria, you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. So I've been at Merck for 5 years. I started in discovery chemistry, and my job at the beginning was to synthesize and to design and synthesize molecules. So my academic career had me very well trained on the synthesis part. The design of what to make was sort of what I learned on the job, and the multi-parameter optimization and figuring out how to learn from each data cycle to generate better molecules in the next set. It's been a really amazing transition from my perspective, working with teams of very dedicated and talented scientists at every aspect of the drug discovery part. And I've learned a lot from them. And through being exposed to all of the things that different people are doing, I became interested in chemoinformatics and exploration of chemical space on a broader scale. So a couple of years ago, I transitioned into the technology-enabled chemistry group, where now my role is more focused on using chemoinformatics and data analysis to understand what challenges the project is facing at this particular point, what predictive models we can use to try to work our way out of that issue, And then doing this also by exploring very broad chemical space and using automation to synthesize some of these molecules most efficiently. So I think for me, the biggest challenge when transitioning from academia, where I had done total synthesis, which if you're not familiar with organic chemistry, means you pick a really hard molecule and you spend years trying to prove that you can make it. When I joined industry, we were trying to answer very specific biological questions. And so the point here was to choose the simplest possible molecule to answer that question. So I think that was the thing that I had to learn. But from there on, as time progressed, my responsibilities shifted from being almost entirely in the lab and doing exactly the same thing for most of the day to now being mostly in front of a computer, trying to think broadly about what to then go into a lab and synthesize. But it's been very helpful to know that whatever I can design, I can very easily synthesize because of my solid training.
Thank you for sharing the transition that happened when you joined initially and what it looks like over the couple of years when you've been in the industry. So that sort of brings me to my second question, which is like, what did your first job in the industry look like? Like when you start at an entry level, how is that? And then how has your career path developed over time? And what are the growth options you get in the kind of role that you're currently in at your company? And do you have an advice for current PhDs to postdoc, so how they can plan a successful long-term career in industry? So basically asking like, what was the entry-level position like, and then what is the growth curve that you expect when you are in an industry position, and what are the suggestions or comments you have for the PhD postdocs? I'm also going to post this in the chat for the really long question, and maybe Arijit, Florencia, and Danilo can
I can go first if that's okay. Yes, so I think I might be a little bit different than the others. I did an industry postdoc, and so that was my first entrance into industry. But that experience is quite different than having a job in industry. So you're just doing a postdoc, you're still working in the lab. In terms of my first position, I started off as a bench scientist at Novartis, and then I've been able to grow in my role. So now I'm a lab head. I really don't do any bench work anymore at this point. And in terms of growth opportunities, I think it kind of depends on what you want to do. So there's kind of two tracks as I see them. You can be an individual contributor, or you can be more of the managerial route, and you're going to do different things throughout your career depending on which one you want to focus on. I've chosen to go more of the managerial route, and I think, I've had a lot of opportunities for growth. A lot of them are around taking on more leadership roles on projects and not just focusing on what I can do at the bench, but more about building my team and contributing to the team, and actually moving towards discovery of a new drug. I think you also asked about skill sets that are really relevant, and it's already been in a couple of people's comments. We probably all think the same thing. Collaboration ends up being incredibly important. It turns out to make a drug, you need a team of many dozens of people during the various different stages of drug discovery. And so being able to work in that kind of collaborative environment and see where you contribute and where you fit in, and how you can take what other people are doing and use that to propel what your group is doing. Just kind of all of that integration becomes really important. And so that collaboration is incredibly important, and becomes one of the major things that we try to probe when we hire people to join Novartis.
Yeah, and I would just like to echo what Florencia said. It's mainly in your hands the way your career will go, and that's the probably beauty of industry jobs. You can pick whatever fits most your personality. So you can be an individual contributor working in a matrix environment. You can be a manager having a lab, as in academia, more or less. So it really depends on the type of idea and approach that you have when you enter these type of jobs. And probably the only difference, and that's something that you guys should try and probe when you go interview for companies, is to understand the culture of the company and how they envision the development of each employee there. So the advice I can give you is that it's all in your hands, and that when you go and interview for companies, it will be up to you to find out what's their vision for the employees. There are companies that will have the vision of the employees like, they have to do a certain job, and there will be minimal development that will be invested, and usually these companies don't have a bright future, let's say. And then there are the ones like Novartis or Genentech or Roche or AstraZeneca. They really make an effort to include a diverse pool of people and take advantage or leverage the diversity of the people.
Abhijit, do you want to share your experiences?
Yeah, and I just wanted to, hi everyone. I think I kind of agree with both of you, and I just wanted to add a few things to that. I think, the growth and your career path is entirely, it's very role specific, right? I mean, it depends on what kind of role, what kind of department you are going in. If you're trying to build a team, if the company is going into a new direction and you're trying to develop something new or bring some new technology in there, you have a lot of opportunity to really grow the team, bring in new technologies, and that kind of increases the responsibility. And also you get to work with a lot of times you get to work with the other side, the business side of the company as well, while doing very basic research and drug discovery, because then you become part of this the group of core expertise which the company is trying to either develop internally or partner with some kind of small startups or other technologies. So that's an interesting part of the role as well. So it depends what kind of role. Are you joining a team which is growing? Are you joining a team which is already established? You're bringing in a new skill set. That's great as well. So it's very role specific, I would say. That I don't have. I mean, to be honest, I don't have an advice to have a long career in the industry. I think the first step is to get your step at the door, and once you get there, I would say that probably the most important thing is to always reinvent yourself. You always get you take the challenge, right? I mean, the thing is, nobody comes to in an industry knowing everything, but once your team starts growing and you're getting more responsibilities, you will be probably thrown something at you which you have never done in your life. For example, if you're working in one specific technology, and there is something else which is coming up in the field which is related, but something which you have never worked on, and the management team comes and tells you that, okay, this is something which you want to build a new team, you have to bring that technology in. You have to, really spend time in, and that's where your PhD postdoc experience comes in, that you can study the field. You have to have that confidence to bring in those new things. So constantly reinventing and learning yourself is also, helps in growing the career and growing your team.
So we have a lot of international students in the audience today, and not everyone is probably going to continue their future career in the US. So my next question is to Danilo, who has also worked in the Europe. So can you share your experience? Like, was it any different from working in the US, and how would you compare sort of the work culture in the two continents? And were there any particular opportunities in Europe or in the US that were attractive to you and you chose one over the other? So how was that transition for you?
Yeah, thanks. That's a very good question. Of course, I had the privilege of working for Novartis in Europe at the headquarters, which was a great experience. It's in the center of Europe and a great international environment. So I have very good memories of that experience. And of course, what I can say is, again, more than the location, is the international cut of the company. So Novartis is in Switzerland. Of course, it's a Swiss company. So is Roche. And the experience I had was, in terms of way of working, similar to what I would experience in Genentech. Of course, Genentech has a scientific drive, which is very, very special and very unique to that place. But apart from that, the tendency of working in international teams and knowing different line functions that would do things that are completely different from what I was doing was a commonality. Obviously, there are differences in terms of microenvironment of job opportunities. So there are little hubs, and probably the US has more of these hubs like the Bay Area or New York or Boston, which have a very, very high number of opportunities. in Europe has been traditionally a little bit less. So that would be the only thing that I would comment about in terms of clear differences.
Yeah, that's a nice segue to my next question to Manisha, actually. We would like to ask you, like, how did you organize your job search? Were you looking all across the US, or were you only targeting the hubs that Danilo was just saying?
Yes, Danilo actually raised a good point about the hubs in the US, and actually that does come in, that does play a huge role in narrowing down your search. So I did actually look for industry jobs right after my PhD, which was around over 2 years ago. And I did realize location is a big factor where you are located. And back then I was in Long Island, not too many pharmaceutical jobs out there. Also, it was a very different political atmosphere, not to forget that. So in that essence, I did narrow it down to looking for positions firstly in Northeast. I actually wanted to do a multi-step application process where I would first apply to Northeast based companies. So I was looking for companies around Boston, actually more than New York, just because I knew it would be an easier transition if I did want to grow in my career in the future. And there are so many opportunities which I know of after being in Boston for just over 6 months. It's just an excellent place to be if you do want to be in industry and actually collaborate with the academic environment too. I think it's pretty comparable to what San Francisco has to offer. And a lot of companies are growing in both the hubs. And you raise a good point about a lot of people here. I see in the chat, people are asking questions about can you apply for an industry position when you do need sponsorship? And that was one of the biggest concerns I had as well. So one advice I would like to share regarding that is, yes, you can apply. And I am on my student visa and on OPT aspect of it. So timing for when you do it is really essential, because it is harder to convince companies to sponsor a different work visa for you from the start. So if you do come with your own sponsorship for at least a year, where the company is just trying to test the waters with you and make sure that you are an asset to the company, they are equally investing in you as much you are investing in them. They are more than willing to actually help you in every way you can. And in just under 4 months, AstraZeneca has been so kind to me. And I'm pretty sure each and every individual here would actually find themselves in the same waters if they were to apply with their own sponsorship initially rather than looking for one. And not to mention the job market, I'm sure everyone on the panel would agree with me here, is actually really good. And we are seeking scientists. We are actually looking for many eager scientists to come join and help the teams and the industry grow. And every one of the companies represented here today, Big Pharma, is actually looking for science-driven people.
If I may interject just for a second, it's very good advice to try to apply on OPT, but if that for some reason is not the case for you, a lot of the big pharmaceutical companies sponsor O1 visas for entry-level PhDs. So if you can't get an OPT or you've used it or what happened, it's not the end of the world.
Thank you for that advice, Maria. So I will now move on to Aditi, and I would like to ask, because you are based out of Canada, what is the environment of opportunities there for scientists if you want to apply, and what's the method of applying?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the life science space or the pharmaceutical space in Canada is increasingly expanding now. 4 years back, not so much. 4 years back, it was a lot more academia focused. But I think there's a lot of great grad talent. So there's University of Waterloo, University of Toronto that has excellent life science and math programs. So there's a huge talent pool there. Due to immigration and pandemic, I think a lot of talented scientists have made their way to Canada. And then also because of a lot of funding increase, many startups have come out of incubators, all leading to an explosion in the number of jobs that you would see in pharma industries or life science startups in Canada now. So I think the landscape is growing and very, very different from what it was 2 to 3 years ago. Process, I would say it's just the same as any place else. One of the advantages in Toronto is that it's still a much smaller community, right? So if you reach out and you, you'd like to network, just reach out for a coffee chat, share your resume. Even if they can't help you directly, I think the community is such that it'll definitely link you to somebody else who's more oriented with your research interests or your career development. And I think it's a great time to get into that space if you're really looking at Canada now.
Comments. I will hand over to Taliana now.
All right, thanks so much, Rupali, and excellent usage of the chat. Please continue to type in your questions there, and the panelists will do as best as they can to type in some answers. And remember, we'll also have the breakout rooms starting at about 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, where you can have more discussions there. And I just wanted to know that one of the messages I put in the chat was that Manisha had kindly shared with me 2 job postings at AstraZeneca from their genomics team. I wanted to make sure I had also shared that with all of you. So I put those links in the chat, and they're also on the Eventbrite page as well. So thanks to Manisha for getting those job postings over to me from AstraZeneca. So now I would like to transition and talk a little bit more about the job search process and applying and interviewing for industry positions, both the perspective of our panelists who did this more recently and those who have had a lot of experience interviewing people on the other side of the table as well. And just not to put Florencia on the spot, but I just wanted to start with you because you did an industry postdoc, and a lot of people have questions about the benefit of doing that and how it can prepare you for your next step within industry. I saw some notes in the chat about this, so I thought you have a unique perspective on it. If you could just share with the audience your thoughts on why it was a valuable experience for you.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the first thing to note about an industry postdoc is you want to make sure that you want to go to industry in your career before you do it, because that transition back to academia is not straightforward. So it's a one-way street. So I knew that I did not want to stay in academia. I wanted to move to industry. In that way, an industry postdoc is incredibly beneficial because you are in a company and there's just a lot of, even if you're not working on a drug discovery project, there's just a lot of exposure to things that I think you don't appreciate before you get into industry, into drug discovery, like terminology and, you know, just understanding what kinds of experiments are people running, and, you know, silly things like being in 384 well plates or 1536 well plates can be really, like, you know, not scary if you've never done it before. Understanding when people start kind of off the cuff talking about PK/PD efficacy, just all of this like terminology that comes up on project teams, you just see it before, and I find that really helpful. And then I can't really, you know, I don't think you need connections to industry to get jobs in industry, but I will say as an industry postdoc, you're super well connected and it's really easy to find a job afterwards. It is, you know, you just, especially in Cambridge, I think that that's the other thing that we were talking about, these different hubs, is there's so many people constantly leaving the company that by the time you're done with your postdoc, you know people everywhere. And so I, you know, didn't have great publications, and I was super competitive with people who did have really nice publications and came from really high powered labs, because I had a different skill set, which was working in these collaborative teams, kind of understanding the mechanisms of big pharma. And so I don't think that it's just a different, you know, different skill set, and I didn't have to prove it through like a cell paper, for example. So that for me was a great experience, and I'm really happy that I did it. But it is, you know, perfectly accomplished people haven't done industry postdocs, so you're still getting the same scientific rigor and training in an academic position. You're just gonna come in with a different experience.
Great, thanks for sharing that. So now I wanted to address questions for Maria and Aditi. About coming from academia and looking to make that first transition into an industry job. how did you prepare to be a strong candidate when you were applying? Were there steps that you took when you were finishing up your time in academia before you got ready to apply to that first industry job? Or did you feel like your resume or your CV was kind of all ready to go and you just went ahead and started applying? Or were there things that you really did to prepare to apply for your first role in industry? So Maria, I know you've had a few positions in Merck now, but thinking about that transition from the postdoc, at the end of your postdoc, when you're thinking about applying to Merck, for example, how did you get yourself ready to apply?
Right. So I knew I wanted to go into industry sort of from the beginning of my PhD. So I took a couple of steps along the way. I audited some pharmacology classes and a cancer biology class. Then I chose to do a postdoc at MSK because I was going to be in an environment that thinks about drug discovery to some extent. And as Florencia was mentioning, learning some of that lingo before interviewing is very helpful, and it helps you sort of understand the problems people are thinking about, and so that you don't bore them with some irrelevant problem you've been thinking about during the interview, understanding what the needs of the organization are. And then to actually prepare for the interview, the Career and Professional Development Office was extremely helpful for me. There were a couple of talks, one from Jean-Luc Dumont, who sort of set the standard, in my opinion, on what efficient communication should look like in terms of how to put together a presentation that conveys your message most effectively. They had also organized, back when I was at MSK, a meeting with a former hiring manager from Merck, who sort of walked us through, Joe Duffy, who sort of walked us through what industry is looking for. And so with those two, as well as mock interviews, I remember walking into Tom Magaldi's office back when he was running the office and saying, I need you to help me prepare for the interview. And he was like, all right, sit down, we're doing it now. So no time to prepare, but that gave me some confidence. And in terms of what it looks like a little bit from the other side, I've been involved in recruiting since I've been at Merck, and I think the one thing that we look for is intellectual input. So trying to do your best as throughout your PhD career to balance what your advisor wants you to do to finish up a project that may have been somebody else's intellectual contribution. At the end of the day, to get into industry, you're going to have to prove that you had creative scientific input and you can problem solve. And I think that's the most important thing, and something that people sometimes lose track of.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Maria. And that's a great point, that when you're applying for jobs, you might get a phone call the very next day after you apply. So that's already, be prepared. That mock interview, you sat down, you did it. So you might have to just answer the phone and do a 30-minute interview. That could be unexpected as well. So spend time preparing on that. A question for Aditi about your data scientist role. So what was the type of research that you were doing beforehand in academia? And did you feel that you had to present yourself in a different way in order to apply for a data scientist position?
For sure. So I was working on epigenomics of solid tumors, mostly gastric cancers, both in my PhD and postdoc. And when I was doing my PhD, I knew I wanted to go into industry. I didn't see myself going down the tenure track position. But in Singapore, where I was doing my PhD, there was not a lot of industry presence. And I had to move to Toronto for personal reasons. Again, not a lot of industry presence. So I took up a postdoc in a lab that I'd been following since my PhD days, again, focused on epigenomics of solid tumors, right? But there I reached out to the, like Maria mentioned, the career development team at the university, and they really helped me out. Like, it was the first time where I got some insight into what kind of questions can be posed to you during an interview, how to frame your resume. So I remember taking a very rough draft of my resume with them, and I was very proud of my publications on it. But I think that the feedback that I got from him was how to structure the resume, what is the most key skills to really highlight on, on those 2 pages is what was crucial. And then the other thing that I did was I tapped into an informal network of peers called STEMPeers here in Canada. These are, again, people like you and me. They've been in academic settings and now have moved on to, varied industry positions. And again, I just reached out to them to get feedback on my resume, get feedback on how to pitch yourself and how to present your research. So I was still talking about the same project. I was still talking about the same accomplishments. Just how you phrase them or what you focus on can be a little different depending upon the position you're applying for.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'd also like to hear from Arijit and Danilo on this topic of being on the other side of the table, and you've had experience interviewing candidates to join your team, to be on placement on roles on your team. And so Arijit, I know you and I were just communicating about this earlier in the day, that you've hired a lot of people just in the past year. So could you start by sharing some advice on what you look for as strong characteristics in people that you're interviewing?
Yeah, sure. But, I just want to take a step back and just want to, highlight a few points, which I think may be really useful for a lot of people. I think someone just mentioned that, don't be afraid to apply, because the visa situation is changing in the industry. A lot of industries giving you one visas. So I know that, and I can give you an example, last month, in my team, we interviewed someone from Mount Sinai who is a postdoc. She was on H1B, academic H1B, but we liked her, and I'm processing the visa for her right now, O1 visa. So, you'll be surprised that her resume matched perfectly with the job description, but she did not apply for that role. Our HR had to reach out to her through LinkedIn, and that's how we got her to apply. And then when I asked her why didn't you apply, she said that she was not sure because of this visa. So that's the first thing. Don't be afraid to apply. The O1 visa is a lot of it depends on your resume, right? It's something, there are certain rules. You have to have some credentials to really be, to have a successful O1 visa. But if you have good publications, if you think that you can get through that O1 process, you should definitely apply. That's the first thing. The second thing, there is a misconception that you need to know someone inside the industry. That's how you get a job. I think that's totally wrong, and it has changed, I think, over the years. And the reason it has changed, I can tell you a little bit on that, because and I'm sure some of the other panelists will probably agree with me that the platform which we are using right now to get applications has changing. It's changing industry wide, because earlier it used to come through HR. We used to see the CVs after it was screened by HR, but now through like Workday, I know a lot of people are using Workday, many of these companies, where we get to see the CV directly. So if someone applies, I get to see the CV. I don't know the visa status. I don't need to know. I just need to see, what are the credentials. And then if the candidate is good, we'll do whatever it needs to bring him or her in that company. So that's also, I think, is important, that don't think about that. And in terms of what we are looking for, I think it also varies role to role and company to company. And at Regeneron, as some of you may know, that we are a very basic science-driven company. The Regeneron is very academic. Now, at times it feels like, for me, it feels like I'm still, doing, in an academic institute. So for that, we really value the work that you do in PhD or in postdoc. So if you have a PhD, or if you're fresh out of PhD, yes, you can apply. We do hire a lot of fresh PhDs. We also hire people with solid postdoc experience, industry or academics. It depends on the skill set. So few things I would say that, I think also there's a wrong conception that people don't care about publications. We don't. But if you have good publication, you should always highlight that. You should always tailor your presentation on what exactly has been asked in the job description. And one thing we really like to see is out of the box thinking and problem solving skills. And at the end, adding something which will tell us that why, what new you can bring to the table. So if you are working on specific area and are applying on a, let's say, I can just give you an example. If you're applying for a siRNA discovery design role, but you have a very good idea about developing a new delivery tool for siRNAs, and that's what you wanted to add on to your presentation, that's great. That's what, so you have to have this broader view. And for the one-to-one interactions, we always like to see, rather than, focusing on the specific, area of research, how much exposure you have or understanding you have of the field, how much you know about what what's the latest in the field, who is doing what, and what are the drawbacks, what are the challenges. So those broader perspective, I think it really helps in the one-on-one interactions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Arji, for all of that super helpful information just about your own experience interviewing people recently. And also for Danilo, you've led a few different groups over the years in your time working in a few different organizations. Can you tell us about your experience interviewing people and what really stands out to you as somebody who is a strong candidate or conversely a really weak candidate that you wouldn't consider?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. I think that, people that talked before me touch upon the most important topics. So first of all, do not eliminate yourself from the job interview by not applying because of visa or anything like that. Those are things that really come into play much, much later. And, you are in a country which is relatively welcoming to immigrant workers in the science field. So you shouldn't worry about that at all. Of course, there is this conception that you would need a good publication to land a job in the industry and so on. And, especially for the new generation of postdocs that is coming up, I would just advise them not to let the publication define them as scientists or as workers, because the publication comes from many different factors. And I can give you, I cannot make any name, but of course, there have been cases with people with great publications, which were horrible candidates, and the other way around, maybe people that were unlucky in their postdoc, not because of their, own fault, but they turn out to be extremely good candidates and team members. So the first thing that I personally, of course, I cannot speak on the behalf of the whole Genentech or Novartis where I've been working, because everyone is different. But what I personally look into, of course, is the scientific acumen. So how they approach a problem and what's the thinking behind that, even if the experiment failed or things didn't work. Obviously, it's difficult to screen for, clever people that do not have great publication records simply because it doesn't come out in the CV. So what I would advise you is that if you had a problem, and this is unfortunately not uncommon, if you had a problem during your postdoc or PhD in terms of publication, you have to make evident that there is, anyway, you're an active thinker, you can solve problems, attend courses that would help you in getting into industry later on. If you are interested in pharmacology, go for pharmacology courses or try to diversify your background. So that's the advice I would give you. In terms of other qualities that we look for, is really it comes down to be a nice person, because you have to work in a lot of teams with people that are very different from you. So you'll work with a chemist or a biochemist, and maybe you're a biologist or a mouse biologist like me. And those are different personalities that have to work well together. So those are things that we really look at, and they usually come out during the interview process. So this is the most important thing to me.
Wonderful. Shane, thanks for sharing that, Danilo. So I wanted to ask maybe one or two more questions, and then we're going to move into the breakout rooms. And again, thank you to everybody who's utilizing the chat. So now going a step further beyond the interview and even thinking about the negotiation aspect of an industry job offer, it's really helpful to understand the typical salary range for an entry-level position for somebody who's coming from a PhD or postdoc. So you can have that information handy when you have to negotiate your own salary. And so I know these can sometimes be difficult questions to answer, but we thought whoever would like to be as honest as possible about just sharing information on the typical salary range that for an entry-level position for somebody moving from academia to industry to a scientist role, that first job either coming out of the PhD or the postdoc, and what that salary range might look like, just so people can have some of that information handy when they are applying for jobs and would have to negotiate in their own case. So maybe Manisha, not to put you on the spot, but if there's anything you could share about even how you found that information for yourself when you had to negotiate your own job offer.
Sure, Taliana. So it's a very good question, actually. And I've noticed that when I was applying, there were some companies who did have a posting on LinkedIn. There was a suggested salary range posted alongside the job right at the bottom of the posting. It was rare, but some of the companies did have that. And that did give me an idea. And one more tool there were two other tools I actually looked at for when I was interviewing for this current position. One was Glassdoor, which actually does have posting for suggested salary ranges. You would find that for entry-level position. Again, these are very company team dependent, and there is no set range, but within a certain geographical area, they are comparable. And one thing to note, which I've learned recently, is that certain companies offer what is called regional salaries versus national salaries. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not too sure how that works. But for instance, AstraZeneca does national salary. So no matter where you are in a certain role, you will be getting paid the same salary. So that is a point to note. I'm not too sure about how Roche and Novartis does it, but if you other panelists want to chime in and comment on that, feel free to do so. And the third tool was just based on the living situation in every city. You can use labor certification tool actually to search for instance, in Boston, what are the living expenses like and what a scientist or senior scientist position should get paid for. And this information is public, which you can find out. And I based all of these, based my knowledge on all of these tools when I went in for negotiating for my salary.
Can I make a quick comment, just because I think this comes up a lot, and it's something that you won't have experienced before, is that it's important to think about the total compensation package. Because a lot of companies, it's not just your base salary. There will be a bonus that's a percentage of your salary. A lot of companies do 401k matching. Like, these are things that you've never thought about, but it's a fair amount of money when these companies are giving you money to put in your 401k that you don't have to put in there, and these bonuses. And so as you're comparing salary, make sure that you're not just comparing base salary, but you're thinking bigger picture about what that total compensation is. And there's a lot of other benefits that you can get that add to that. And then the other thing that I found very useful is, honestly, as my postdoc friends were getting jobs, I just asked them how much they were getting. And I just ask. So at least you're sort of in a peer group. Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that, Florencia. Yeah, that it's not just the salary, it's the whole package. And a lot of those elements of the job offer we've never seen before coming from academia. So even if they're willing to share what their offer letter looked like if they got a job, so you can understand all those different components beyond just the salary. But this actually, thank you, Florencia, this leads me into my last question. You were mentioning about kind of having a peer group of friends. I want to go back to a few of our panelists who had spoken earlier that I want to hear from one more time, and then we're going to move to the breakout room. So for Aditi and Maria, if you could briefly talk about career mentorship that you've had in your position. Just thinking about your role getting started at either Roche or Merck, and how you received mentorship in your role in order to be successful, and kind of how that has changed over time so that you feel like this is going to turn into a long-term position for you. So where have you been able to find mentors in your company in order to feel that you can be successful in your position, starting at the very beginning in that first transition, and then over time, over the last couple of years, how has mentorship helped you do your job better? So perhaps Aditi, start with you and then go to Maria to end the question.
Oh, I'd just like to add on to the previous question. Definitely ask your friends, but don't be afraid to ask the recruiters also of what the compensation bandwidth is for these positions. Before you go in and negotiate, just to have a good sense. But switching to this question, I think initially when I came on to this role, I was one of the few data scientists with my skill set. The others were more from a stats heavy background, and I was coming from a computational biology background. So in the initial days, I did a lot of cold calling. Like, I reached out to people who thought were more similarly aligned to my background, and just set up a 15-20-minute coffee chat with them just to introduce myself and learn more about what they're doing and what skills I bring to the table, and how does that fit into the many projects that are going on in the industry, right? In a company, there are so many diverse projects you can not possibly know. So it's always good to talk to other people. And at the same time, whoever your manager is, also let them know that what are you most interested in? Where do you want to move forward? What are the kind of projects that excite you? And eventually, if you do that consistently, at least that's what happened for me, they started offering me projects that were more in line with what most excited me. And that organically grew my mentor network. So now I was working with more reverse translation scientists. I was working with more early research scientists. And through those collaborations, I can, I'm at a stage now where I can reach out to them and ask for mentorship, or they'd be happy to absorb me in their group if I wanted to make that switch. So that's how you organically grow your network. I think initially express your interest, but obviously add value when you're given that opportunity, add value, and then keep interacting with those points of connection you keep making in every single project that you're a part of.
Yeah, I think I have to echo most of the things Aditi just said. Except I was lucky that the person sharing an office with me when I started was doing chemoinformatics and data-driven chemistry. So I got to watch the cool things she was doing, and then started expressing an interest to my manager and to my manager's manager that I wanted to move in this direction as well. And I was actually kind of surprised at how quickly they put me in the technology-enabled chemistry group, and allowed me to explore this interest. And then I think one other aspect, as you're meeting people who are doing things you're interested in and you ask for their mentorship, coming back and sharing what you've done with what they taught you or how you've contributing, just like Aditi was saying, is very important to continue growing that relationship and having them see that it's worth their time investing in your development.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful point to end on, as we're thinking about our first job, but also our career over time. So we're right at the mark where we're going to be opening the breakout rooms. And so I'm going to open them right now so that everybody can see. There should be an icon somewhere in the panel with breakout rooms. There's 6 rooms. The name of the panelist is listed there as the title of the room. So all the panelists are going to go into their respective room, go into any and all the rooms that you want. You have half an hour to do this, and we're just going to have conversations in these smaller groups. So you can visit 1, 2, 3 rooms, and all the panelists will go into their respective rooms. So just click on that room and then say that you'd like to join it. You can do that as you wish, and I'll give a notice that we're going to end with about 2 minutes warning. I'm going to give a notice there. And I just wanted to also remind everybody that we're going to have another event next Tuesday on non-bench careers. So this event is obviously for scientists and research positions, but we're going to be talking about positions outside of research, outside of R&D, still within industry. So that's going to be part 2 next Tuesday. So with that, please join any of and all of the breakout rooms. I'm going to close them in about half an hour, and then we'll all come back here afterwards to say goodbye. All right, and I'll stick around in case you have any questions.
Are you going to stop recording now, Taliana?